And so, recording in progress. So we're good to go now, and I'll just give us a little introduction. We'll just chat for a little bit here today. On the screen that you see is Dave and Catherine Woodbury. Dave has been a pastor of First Baptist Church of Nocona. Remind me how many years, Dave?
Coming up on 17 years.
17 years as pastor, and then yes. You were there 3 years prior.
Yeah, 3 years prior. Yeah, so coming up on 20 years total on staff.
Yeah. And coincidentally, Catherine has also been at First Baptist Nocona the same length of time.
That's right. That's right.
And for anybody that's watching this later who may not know, Dave is also, as of this year, is on our staff at Harvest Baptist Association as our associate strategist. So I'm excited about that and the cool things that are going along with that. What we're going to talk about today is the topic of churches partnering in their community for ministry. And specifically what Dave and Catherine are going to talk about today is a partnership that they've had with Bethel Baptist Church there in Nocona for several years and doing Vacation Bible School. And originally we were going to have Patrick Hill, who's the pastor at Bethel, to be on this today. And he ended up being in church camp this week. And so because Catherine has been there from the beginning as well, she is stepping in to kind of give another perspective on that. So I'm just going to kind of get the ball rolling and say there, there's a few things that I think it'd be interesting to hear from you today, kind of how the partnership kind of got started, because I know it precedes Patrick because he's only been there a couple of years. But just also kind of what that looks like, the specifics of what you've done together, what kind of logistics you had to do to make those kind of things work, and then what kind of lessons maybe that you've learned along the way that would not only enhance this particular partnership, but maybe would inform other churches as they're considering, let's do something together in our community for the sake of the kingdom. So I'm going to pretty much just let y'all roll with it. And if I think of something, I'll jump in. And other than that, just go for it.
All right. Well, I'll start out with how it came to be. For a long time, and this was even when I was on staff as the student and worship minister. Bethel would do their thing. We would do our thing. They would typically pick a week in the summer and do a morning VBS. We would pick a different week in the summer and do an evening VBS. And it got to the point for us, and this was, I think, right about the transition when I transitioned into the pastoral role, we were having a real difficult time getting volunteers. It was kind of the thing where, we'd be there on a Sunday morning, like a week out, and saying, we can't leave until somebody volunteers to teach the third graders. And there'd be this long pause. And then finally someone would grudgingly say, okay, I'll do it, which isn't what ministry is supposed to be. Forcing people to concede, cry uncle, fine, I'll do it if you'll let us go eat lunch. And so what we realized, we took an attitude toward ministry that if God is not providing volunteers and human resources, maybe that's not what God would have us to do right now. And so for a number of years, we didn't do VBS at all. We tried a few things here and there, just different things during the summer that some worked, some didn't so much. But we got to the point that there was kind of a change in some of our membership, some of our congregation. And we had some people saying, hey, we're interested in doing VBS, but it wasn't enough people to put on a full-blown VBS. And I knew that Bethel was still doing theirs and they were doing a great job. But I also knew that they had an aging congregation. A lot of their volunteers were getting older and maybe some of them wouldn't be able to do what they had done in the past. And so I approached Dale Berry, who was the pastor at Bethel at the time. with this proposal, I just said, hey, we've got some folks who want to help with VBS, but we don't have enough people to do one on our own. How would you feel about us just, stepping in and volunteering at your VBS, right? It's still going to be Bethel's VBS. We're just going to help fill in some of the gaps and give our folks a place to serve. And he was the one that said, well, why don't we do it as a joint venture, make this a partnership, and we'll publicize it from start to finish as Bethel and First, as a real gospel partnership to do that. And so I took it to my folks, he took it to his folks, and for the most part, everybody was real excited about the possibilities. And so we moved forward with that. We decided to go ahead and do it at their facility, since they had done it there all those years nonstop, and they kind of had a system of where they put people and how they moved throughout their building. And so we felt like that was the easiest thing for them to do. At one point, we had even talked about switching, going back and forth year to year between their facility and our facility. But we ended up just saying, hey, let's leave it here. We will accommodate, or they accommodated us very well. And so we sort of fit into a lot of what they already had going on. And that the first year of that was 2012. And we have done it every year since then, with the exception of 2020, where we didn't do anything. Everything was put on hold. But other than that, we have partnered with them every year since that first year, 2012, doing Vacation Bible School. As far as the logistics of it, Catherine, I don't know if you want to chime in, kind of where it starts just like a normal VBS, where we order, all the kits and the stuff. And then they work on their end and we work on our end to get volunteers. Usually folks sort of have an idea of where they want to serve. And so we try to put people in places that they request. And then usually we have a big meeting, April or so.
Yeah. Pretty quick. Yeah.
And we make sure that everybody knows what they're doing, pass out, literature, those kind of things. But that's the first time that we get everybody in one room, folks from First and folks from Bethel. Usually we go over the theme song, let them hear that, and sort of this big unveiling. And it might even be, April. That sounds right, doesn't it? I don't think it's March.
Yeah, I think it's April.
And
then another one before it starts.
Yeah. And so I think usually Bethel is they've done kind of assigned the rooms because it's their facility and they know where groups will fit best. And usually we have maybe one more meeting in there somewhere just to help answer any questions. And there's a big meeting the Sunday afternoon before Monday that we start, and we let folks get in, decorate rooms. We decorate the auditorium and fellowship hall and all the areas that we're going to be using. And then the logistics of the week itself, if you were just to step in off the street, you probably wouldn't know that it is a partnership, just because it works so seamlessly. Everybody gets along, and nobody, for the most part, I think, especially now, maybe early on there was a little bit of territorial, hey, this is kind of my thing, and totally understandable. I don't mean that as a criticism. But at this point, we've done it for so long as a partnership that there really doesn't feel like there's any territorialism, or this is my room, this is our building, this is our church. It really is kind of a seamless partnership, and we're putting a teacher from Bethel with a helper from First Baptist and maybe a couple of youth, one from each church in there. And so you really wouldn't, if you were just to come in, on Monday morning or sometime during the week, I don't think you would be able to tell, oh, well, those are First Baptist people and those are Bethel people. They have been so gracious to invite us in, and our folks have been great to just sort of fit in and blend in, so that, you know, we're all kind of one group. It doesn't feel like there's that division. Were there any other kind of logistical questions that you had, or how certain things might work either in prep or during the week itself?
Yes, and you may have said this and I missed it, but so how do your two churches go about promoting and publicizing in advance? You know, what kind of information do you get out into the community and those kind of things?
At this point, usually, I think we've handled a lot of the promo, right? Our office staff usually prints up, because we usually do VBS on the same week every year. It's the very first week that the students are out of school, unless that week happens to be Memorial Day, and then we just push it back a week. So it's the first full non-holiday week that the students are out of school. And so our office staff usually will do flyers and put those in Nocona Elementary School, send them out. And then we do a lot of social media promotion, that kind of thing. And then
This year, our sign up, we had one of our ladies in our church who she's a teacher, so she understands all the ins and outs of Google and all of that. And so she actually put our registration process, signing up process on a link. So that was helpful too.
Yeah. And so that's I don't know that we've done flyers. Early on, we did flyers around town, those kind of things. And I don't know that we've done those much. It's mostly been putting registration forms in the hands of elementary school students that last week of school before they're out, and then and social media. And usually we run an ad in the paper maybe for a week or two. So that's kind of how promotion works. So we've kind of handled most of that part of it. And then of course they've publicized it to their church and get the word out. And it's funny, there is such a unity and a melding that a lot of times if I will put a Facebook post out there, a lot of their church members will share it. So it's not even a deal where they're only sharing stuff that comes from them and we're going to share stuff that comes from us. It's a process without barriers, you know, between churches.
I love that.
Let me also mention this, because this is always a question. How do you do follow-up with two churches? And that probably goes to one of the lessons that we've learned is, and I don't know if it was, well, let me back up. The first lesson that I think we've learned, and it wasn't a hard lesson because it was just sort of there from the beginning, was there has to be a relationship of trust between the churches and especially the leadership of the churches. And so the thing that made this work so easily was the fact that I knew Dale and I trusted Dale, and he knew me and he trusted me. And when I came in and said, can we bring some of our folks in? Never once did he have this idea that they're trying to come in and steal some of our thunder, or they're trying to take some of the credit, or they're trying to take some of our people. And that's exactly right. That was never my intention. And he saw it for what it was. So there has to be that relationship of trust between amongst leadership and amongst the participants there in the churches. And the second thing is, I don't know if it was just our personalities or how we got along. And really it's this way with all the churches in our community, but there was never a concern for who got credit. That was never, we didn't feel like it was a competition. There was never, in any kind of adversarial relationship. If every single kid that came to VBS ended up at their church in their student ministry, praise God for that. We would be thrilled for that. And I think that I can say the same, that if every one of those kids ended up coming to our church and in our children's ministry, I think they would have been thrilled as well. Typically, the way we do it is we sort of try to figure out kids that have some connection to one church or the other, or because we're in a small community, a lot of kids will come who don't have a connection to either church, but they might have a connection to the Methodist church or the Assembly of God church or the Nazarene church. And so usually what we do is, if a kid makes some sort of move, makes a decision, profession of faith, or just expresses an interest in knowing more, usually what we'll do is we'll try to figure out what church they have a connection to, pass that information on to that pastor, to that church. And if they have a connection to no church, then we'll just sort of, try to split them up evenly. Maybe if they're on the south side, south of 82, they can take it. If they're on the north side of 82, we'll take it. Or, it's kind of we don't have a standard, we don't have a policy, anything written down. We just sort of get along. And again, the thing that makes it work is there's no grabbing for credit. It was the exact same way when Patrick came in. Patrick's only been here a little over a year, maybe 15 months or so, but his spirit and his attitude is exactly the same. He's not concerned about credit. He just wants to see kids hear the gospel and come to know Jesus. And so this year, the logistics were a little bit different. Obviously, last year with COVID, this year we did things a little bit differently. We were trying to find facilities that offered the most space, right? And so our facility provided that better than Bethel's. And so for the first time, we did it at our place this year. And we changed some things. We usually do a 5-day VBS. We cut it down to 3, just a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We usually do like 8:30 to noon. This time we only did 8:30 to 10:30. And so we moved rotations a little bit differently. We didn't have crafts. We just did teaching served as one rotation, and then music, and then rec. So we kind of got them through there quickly. Next year, Lord willing, we plan to kind of go back in general, but maybe there were some lessons that we learned and some unique things that happened this year that we might carry over into next year. So what are the lessons?
We talked earlier about one of the ladies who did our Google registration, and then our office staff that did all of the flyers and that kind of a thing. And it's just about finding where different people's strengths lie. I mean, that's kind of what all ministry, is about, but just keeping, your ears open and seeing where people might fit in, especially those that might not know where they fit in. And so that's a big deal, I think, is just learning that. And because we don't know that from the other church as much, that's where their leadership, comes in. And on that same note, it's super important to have a point person at each church. So for a while there was Bethel, when we joined them, they had their own director. And it just so happened that after, I don't know if it was a couple of years or a year after we joined them, that director was retiring or from being a director. And so 2 of us at our church took over that role. And so, but she stayed as kind of a liaison, between us and still does even to this day. So and Dale did a huge amount of work in that area as well, but she was kind of my, I could go to her and that kind of thing. So that's really important, is to have someone at each church who is the point person, not just for each other, but for everyone, to kind of go to. And so she would work on getting all the volunteers and getting a list going, because she knew who those people generally were. And so she would take care of that list. I would take care of our list, and then we get it together and figure out who needed to go where, and then what we still needed to kind of go out and ask people to do. So, but I think it also really helped us with community. Dave mentioned our churches in our community are so close and work so well together. And so I think it really helped that underneath that now our people work well together and can go out into the community, and it's helped us to know each other better and that kind of a thing. It's been an amazing experience for sure.
Yeah. A couple of the other lessons that I sort of jotted down here that we've learned over the past, 9 years or so that we've done this. There has to be a commitment from the leadership to trying to think what the best way to say this is, to get their people on board, right? And to sort of foster and nurture that cooperative attitude. I think one of the reasons that it worked so well for us was because people would see me and Dale just out in the community eating lunch together. I'd drive by and hang out at his office, and we talk and pray and, tell stories and laugh together. We got along well. And so I think people saw that modeled for them. And then we really pushed to make sure that people had that same take, that same attitude of, hey, we're in this together. We're on the same team. This is not, the red team and the green team sort of joining up to do a common project. It's we're the same team. Like we're all one group. And yes, we meet separately on Sunday mornings, and we do some ministry separately, but it's the body of Christ. And then another one is intentionality in making sure that the project, that everybody knows that this is a inside and outside, that everybody knows that this is a cooperative effort. That in all of our literature and all the flyers and all of our posts,
T-shirts, everything.
Yeah, everything. It's Bethel and First. And usually it's funny, when I talk about it, I'll usually say Bethel and then First Baptist, and I do that intentionally.
Sure.
And what I remember Dale hearing him a few times, he would always put First Baptist first. It was First and Bethel, and we didn't plan that. I just think that was part of that intentionality in making sure that people understood. Yes, I'm the pastor at First Baptist Church, but this is a cooperative effort between Bethel and First Baptist Church. And he would, I'm the pastor at Bethel, but this is a cooperative effort between First and Bethel. And again, it goes back to nobody's trying to get credit. Nobody's trying to get the pat on the back. We want to share that. We want to share we don't want any credit. We want God to get the glory for it. But we want to share, any of that responsibility, and we're glad to do that.
So I may think of another question in a minute, but it's it seems like a lot of what I'm hearing from you is that kind of some of the key things are that underlying atmosphere of trust, not only between these two churches, but among the churches of the community.
Yeah.
That kind of flows out of the relationships. You're not just getting together for projects, but you actually know each other, and you're spending time with each other and praying together. And I know that, because you and I've talked about it before, that you have such a strong ministers fellowship, ministerial alliance, whatever you call it. Every community calls it something different, but I've been a part of those too. And I've been a part of them where they were very similar to what you described to me in Nocona. And then I've been a part of some that, about all you're going to manage to do is to meet together once a month and tolerate each other through a meal. So,
Yeah.
but, and then because of that, you're able to let your focus be on the kingdom, because you're not seeing, well, we've got to maintain our identity. We've got to make sure that we're not losing something to somebody else, and it allows you to say, let's be about the kingdom and let's minister to our community, not with the idea of how many of these kids and their families are we going to have sitting in our building next week.
Yeah, it's definitely a big K kingdom versus a small K. We can sit here and build our little kingdom of First Baptist Church and do some things well, but how much greater is it to fulfill the mission to which we've been called is to advance the kingdom of God that manifests itself at First Baptist, and it manifests itself at Bethel and at these other churches. It's funny, you mentioned trust, and this might sound strange, but for a while, we have our Sunday evening Bible study worship time, and our whole family would come, and my kids were the only people under the age of 45, and that was just us, and then beyond that, like 60 was the cutoff. But I knew that there was a group of students over at Bethel about their age that were real faithful that would go. And so I asked Dale, I said, would it be weird if I sent my kids over to Bethel on Sunday nights and plus I think it's good for them to hear a voice other than mine, because they're hearing mine as their parent, plus they're hearing mine as their pastor, plus they're hearing mine. I'm doing student ministry as well. So like I'm the only voice there. They need to hear somebody else. So I said, would that be weird? He said, not at all. We'd love to have them. And so there was a period of time pre-COVID where every Sunday night they would go over to Bethel and be a part of what they did over there. And I had not one moment's hesitation, because I trusted Dale. I trusted he was going to take care of my kids. I trusted he wasn't going to teach anything, weird or freaky or bizarre. And so I think that also grew out of that partnership between us and Bethel. And there was even a time just recently when the students weren't meeting on Wednesday nights over at Bethel, where Patrick's kids showed up at our Wednesday night, a couple times. Like, hey, we love you guys. We're glad to have you. I'm thrilled that y'all are going to be starting up soon, but in the meantime, come on. And
and never once did we ever hear a complaint from our congregation about our kids going to another church. And in fact, from their church, I would get comments like, oh, we're so glad to have your kids. We love seeing them on Sunday nights. And so it was a cooperation between both congregations, and everybody was, great with it. So yeah, that was an amazing, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. And even with VBS, there have been very few, complaint. There's been no like tiffs or anything. Every once in a while, obviously, because it's people, you get something that, something isn't done the way that somebody wants it done or expects it to be done, or
a messy bathroom or a table, just little things.
Yeah, those are we haven't had any big divisive issues, and it's certainly I credit our church and their church, but even more than that, I just credit the Lord for protecting us and providing a spirit of unity among everybody who's been a part of it.
I wanted to go back just a second for talking about the students, something that we logistically didn't talk about, but the kids who have graduated out of BBS, who are now in middle school and high school, have always been such a huge part of our BBS. There is a student curriculum for those kids, but what we do typically is, and again, pre-COVID, is all of the students that want to volunteer, I will start with them like 6 weeks ahead of time on Wednesday nights. And I will go to Bethel and have time with them, typically before our youth, so we can do both. And we meet and I go through the logistics of the whole entire week and BBS and the ways that they are going to be needed to help. And usually we'll have 2 teachers and then 2 students in every classroom. And so then the students will lead the kids from place to place in the rotations. And so they are kind of in charge in the interim, which gives the teachers time to work on lessons in their classrooms. And then if they want to, they can follow along and go with them as well. So they have that responsibility, but also they learn all of the choreography for all of the songs during the week. And that's what we do those 6 weeks. We do a little bit of training each night, and then the rest of it is working on learning the songs. And so then during the week of BBS, Dave here is our MC, and the students are all behind him on the stage, just in a group kind of spread out. And then they do all the choreography in front of the kids to kind of help them. Now there's, also the screens. But that's a big part of what they do for us for BBS, and they love it. They seem to really love it. So that's just another way to get your students involved who have graduated out of BBS. So that's been a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, and watching the two separate youth groups interact, and again, seamless. They love each other. They hang out. They laugh together, and it's watching them serve side by side is a neat thing.
Yeah, and I love just hearing the opportunity that you're having to give some training and some experience in some ministry opportunities to those students through that they're having lots of supervision, so they're not being left out on a limb to fend for themselves, and it's just a cool thing. It's discipleship in the moment, not a discipleship study. It's really helping them for that, and so I really appreciate that. We're getting pretty close to when we're going to need to wrap up. I guess the other thing that occurs to me is what and I think I know the answer to this because it's going to be similar. But what have what can you take from the VBS partnership and say this is scalable, this is transferable to other things that churches might do together in their community? And have you talked about any of those possibilities about doing some other things together?
One of the very first ones of these Third Thursday trainings was on prayer walking. And we haven't nailed it down yet, but that's one very easy thing that we can participate, and not just with Bethel, but we've got another couple of churches in the association here locally, Nueva Vida and Bonita, Shepherd of the Hills, Valley View up north. So those are opportunities, I think, for us to do that same thing, to partner together in ministry, just prayer walking through our communities, looking for opportunities for ways to serve folks, things like that. And then I've talked with Patrick about the possibility of maybe them joining us as we partner with other associational churches if we go back down to Port Arthur next year and do a multi-year partnership down there. And that might be something that would be a neat thing to do. We've also talked about the possibility of doing some student stuff together. None of that we've really, we haven't hashed any of that out or come up with details, but that's another easy possibility of getting students together and doing something, some sort of either service project or just fellowship, just hanging out and enjoying one another.
We've also had our women's ministry Bible study every Tuesday night, and we've done that for quite a few years and have always made it open. And we have had people from other churches who have come to our Bible study. We make it very clear that it's not just a First Baptist Bible study. So we've done that as well.
Yeah. And those are all great. I just, obviously I'm in the position I'm in because I love to see churches work together. But and even as a pastor, that was, kind of my heart with all of those things as well. So, and I appreciate y'all so much, not just for today, but I appreciate y'all. Y'all know that, and just love you and your kids, and appreciate the ministry that you have there and your faithfulness and all that. And glad we get to continue this journey together. And so I guess the last thing for anybody that may be watching this later, if somebody wanted to to sit down with you and say, so Dave or Catherine, either one of them, said, tell me about how this stuff works. What are some things? Can you help us kind of figure out how to get this going? Y'all be willing to do that?
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have asked the question if I didn't already know the answer to it.
Yeah, definitely. Hit us up on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter. Our church, First Baptist Church of Nocona, we got a Facebook page. Jerry's got contact information for me if you want to call or text. If anybody's interested in how to implement this and how to kind of work through the beginning steps of this, I'd be glad to sit down with churches and other places and help them kind of get the ball rolling. Yeah,
perfect. Great. Well, thanks again for today and for y'all. And, I hope that, my prayer is that we're going to see more churches that are in close proximity to each other, not only doing projects together, but building the kind of relationships that you're talking about, and pastors just sitting and having coffee together and saying, how can we encourage each other? How can we be the people of God in our community and not worried about whose building we're trying to get people in? And so,
well, and it's funny. Cooperation has always been sort of a Southern Baptist distinctive. We call it the cooperative program, but it's funny that so many times we make that argument that we can do more together than we can separately, and we see that on a large scale, like for missions.
Sure.
But we fail to see that on a small scale in community. Like if that's true, that we can do more together than we can separately, if that's true for global missions and for North American missions, is that same thing not true of community ministry, that we can do more together than we can separate? And so there's a big, a bigger community out there than either one of our churches. And so why not try to tackle that project together in ways that we can?
Well, that's great. And I can't wrap this up any better than you did right there. So we're just going to stop at this point. Thanks again, and look forward to seeing y'all soon.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.